visited him in January. And she's like, I'm gonna rent this U-Haul. I'm gonna fly up, rent a U-Haul and drive back to Richmond because she's taking some of the furniture from some of her dad's furniture, stuff on his furniture home. And I'm like, well, you know, time and so I'll ride with you. So we're going to. Oh no. Yeah, I met her at Girl Scout camp. I've known her for a long time. And we did the same program at Maine.
Yep.
Collectively.
All right, welcome. Good evening to everyone. It is 7 o'clock, Friday, the 18th of 2025. You were at the City of Bangor's Planning Board meeting. My name is Reese Perkins. I'm chairman of the board. The board members in attendance this evening are Ted Brush, Vice Chair Jonathan Boucher, Tricia Hayes, Ken Hume, and Janet Jonas. They're on my left. Board members are volunteers from the Bangor community. City staff members in attendance this evening include Planning Officer Anya Collette, Assistant Solicitor Grace Ennis, City Engineer Jefferson Davis, and Planning Analyst Brian Scannell. We thank them all for getting us set up and getting the meeting attended to. First thing I'm going to handle this evening is old business. So board members, we have meeting minutes from February 4th, 2025. Any modifications or comments on those meeting minutes?
Move to approve.
Member Hume has made a motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Member Brush. Thank you. No comments. I will look for roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous vote to approve the February 4th meeting minutes. Thank you. Adoption of findings for Broadway RSQ LLC is the second item of old business. I'm going to reference Matt Law R20006 because there is no address on that project. Any discussion on the adoption of findings? If not, I would look for a motion on approval. Member Hayes?
Yep.
Second on that?
Second.
Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval of the adoption of findings for Broadway RSQ. That takes care of all old business for this evening. So I'm going to do my introduction before we get to new business, just so everyone's up to speed. The planning board has two main roles. First, we review amendments to the land development code, which typically include either changes to the zoning districts or changes to text within the code. Our review of these amendments includes adherence to the comprehensive plan, as well as considering any applicable comments or concerns from the public. Our vote on these items is in the form of a recommendation to the City Council as to whether the item ought to pass or ought not to pass. The City Council makes the final decision on zoning and land development code changes. The first item of new business this evening is a code change which falls into this category. Secondly, the board serves as the regulatory authority for the land development permits, commonly known as site plan review. Site plans are reviewed to ensure compliance with city code as to parking, driveways, stormwater management, lighting, landscaping, buffering, building location, environmental impacts, and shoreline zoning as may be applicable. We also ensure the plan meets the dimensional requirements of the project zoning district. We review larger site plans that trigger site location development for the main DEP as well, under their requirements. That's commonly known as SLODA. Some uses are conditional uses that have specific conditions and requirements we use to review the project. The second and third two items on the agenda this evening are land development permit applications. So before we go ahead with those, I'm just going to further introduce how we handle those items. And I would like to just reference anyone that's listening to the city's website for further information on city codes and standards, and also the comprehensive plan, if that information is needed. When the applicant this evening is asked to present their project or proposal, they or their representative should come forward to the podium and provide a brief introduction to their application. Once the presentation has been made, the applicant should stay at the podium while we consider any questions from the staff and/or board members. The applicant may then be seated. We will next open the floor to public comments. If there are any comments from the public, we ask that the person come to the podium and introduce themselves, state whether they are a resident of Bangor, and if they are an abutter of the property, and indicate if they are for or against the project. Either way, it's helpful if public comments reference city codes and standards or the comprehensive plan, because as I've said, those are the documents that we use to make our final decisions. If you are on Zoom this evening and you would like to comment on a project during the public comment time, please use the raised hand function to let us know you would like to speak, and we will then bring you into the meeting. All comments and discussion should remain respectful and considerate of all others. Once public comments are completed, we will close that item to public comment. The board will then deliberate on that particular proposal using the standards as applicable, and we will act on the proposal. Standards will be read and voted on separately as required. Once the standards are reviewed, a decision will be read and voted on. Once a project you are interested in has been reviewed, feel free to leave the meeting. You don't have to stay to listen to other projects. Please, though, be respectfully quiet so as not to disturb the other agenda discussions. So with all that being said, and many of you have been here before, and I know you know how this works, but new business this evening, the first item is a zone change to amend the land development code by changing a portion of a parcel of land located at 861 Broadway, that's map lot R41-005, from contract industry and service district and low density residential district to shopping and personal services district. Said area of land contains approximately 10 acres total. The applicant is 325 Augusta LLC. The owner is the Zone Corporation. So I would ask the applicant or their representative to come on up and present. We've got the packet, so you don't have to make it too lengthy, but give us a brief idea of what you got going on.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name's Andy Johnston. I'm a principal with Atlantic Resource Consultants, and we're pleased to be representing the applicant for this proposed zone change. This property is probably well known to most people in the city of Bangor. It's the site of the Zone radio station, so it's on the ridge right off Broadway between 95 and Griffin Road, and right in front of Bangor High School. That site was originally, it's zoned currently INS district with a contract zone over it that was specific to that radio station use. In 1996, the request was made to rezone that parcel to allow for the radio station and the broadcast tower to be on there. So the specifics of that contract are that it is in the INS district, but it only allows radio broadcast uses. So it's very specific to the site and that previous use. What we were asked to do when we looked at that site, both for the owner and the applicant, was to see what we felt, given the existing zoning patterns around the site and the development patterns in that area of Bangor, what would be the most appropriate zone to rezone that to allow flexibility of use and to tailor things kind of towards what we see along the arterial corridors of Bangor, which are predominantly what I would call high value, light commercial uses. In other words, retail, office type uses, and some allowance for high density residential, which there is in the S&PS district, but it's a transition between, the really dense populated center of town and the more outlying areas. And it allows a flexibility of uses, as I said, that are both high value and compatible with the surrounding areas. And you can see the sites around there. They include the school, Hudson University, the St. Joe's Medical Campus, some low density residential and high density residential, but predominantly where we see the growth patterns there along that corridor are the S&PS districts that are around the main intersections. And I say that we feel that will allow the property to be put to its highest and best use and make use of the fact that it is on an arterial corridor, but still be sensitive to the uses that are around it. So
Thank
that's
you.
the summary, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Andy, appreciate it. You can stay up for a moment. Any comments from staff on this one?
I just want to clarify in the description that said a portion of a parcel of land, this would be for the entire parcel of land, for when you make your motion.
Yep.
I don't have any other comments besides what was in the memo.
Okay, thank you. Board questions for the applicant's representative?
So there's not gonna be a radio station there at all?
No, the radio station, my understanding is radio station license has been transferred already and is going to operate from a different location.
It's gonna be real, I mean, one of them is gonna exist, so it's
Yeah.
gonna be relocated.
Yeah.
Moving downtown. Just a quick question, we don't know what's gonna happen with this property at this point.
No, we don't, and that may be somewhat market driven, and so we're going through the process really to make sure that the zoning is appropriate, that allows a variety of different uses, and then, users will come forward. I'd love to say that we know what's going to be there, but we don't. We're trying to rezone it appropriately to allow the kind of development that could come in and create some value on the
Does the
parcel.
tower come down?
Tower will come down.
Thank you, thank you.
I've got a question, which is sort of related to what the other board members have asked, and it may be more for staff, but maybe Andy, you can address this as well. It seemed to me that the contract zone had a lot to do with the tower, and having that tower there. And if we change this to shopping and personal service district without a contract zone on there, which I think is what we're trying to do here, there is nothing addressing the existence of that tower or the fact that the future usage of the piece might not fit well with a tower, 150 feet behind it. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, and I think the plan is for the tower to come down at some point. That hasn't been finally decided yet, but I think that is the plan. I don't think it's being used as a broadcast tower at this point.
Okay. There is nothing, Planning Officer Collette, there's nothing in making this a shopping and personal service district that would ensure that the tower is removed. I mean, it ended up sort of being non-conforming, wouldn't it?
I'd have to double check the uses, I think I included it in your packets, but broadcast stations may be allowed in shopping personal service district. But, I mean, the fact that it would no longer be used as a broadcast station, I don't think that there would be an issue with it being non-conforming.
Right, but we don't really want to create a non-conforming property typically, right?
No, but let me just double check the uses.
And there's a height issue too, isn't there? I mean, it's restricted to 35 feet, I think.
It is currently restricted to 35, the building height is restricted to 35
Yeah.
feet, and of course there are offsets from the setbacks from the tower, which are regulated for building purposes. It may be informative, I'm just looking through the existing contract zoning agreement, and one of the things in there's a clause in here that says the parties hereby agree that nothing in this agreement should be construed as to preclude the future exercise of Bangor City Council's legislative authority relative to the zoning of the subject premises. In the event that the zoning of said premises is changed by the City Council, any use established under the provisions outlined in paragraph 1, subparagraphs A, B, C, D, F, subject to this agreement shall be allowed to continue as a non-conformity or a non-conforming use, whichever the case may be, in accordance with the provisions of the Land Development Code, as may be in effect at the time of the zone change governing the same. I don't know if that actually answers your question, but I think the idea there was that the City Council can change the zone on this parcel and retain non-conforming uses on it, I think. I'm not an attorney.
Yeah,
I read that very quickly.
In general, I think that's probably true anyway. But
I don't think under any sensible development scenario, I don't think, that tower would remain on the site as a feature. It would impinge the developability of that site.
Certainly, yeah.
This zone does allow for information processing and communications facilities, so
It would be allowed.
I think it could fall under that.
But wouldn't the height be non-conforming?
Well, I mean, the height is currently limited pretty strictly, so you would just be giving it a higher maximum, so I don't think that would be an issue.
What about the conditions on amount of impervious area and building size? Those,
So those are all, again, they're limiting it a lot, and S&PS would be less stringent than that. So they wouldn't have any issues because they would then be under higher maximums in the code. They wouldn't be limited as much if they went to S&PS. So,
And I think those provisions were in that contract because it was, the governing zone was INS, which allows pretty dense, pretty heavy development. So I think that those clauses were inserted in there to make sure you couldn't use it like an INS district, which would be kind of incompatible with some of these surrounding uses.
Yeah, and just continuing on with the tower issue, I mean, I'm actually, I don't know how the rest of the board members feel about this, but I get a sense that it's pretty agreeable to everyone, and I am certainly in agreement with changing the zone. I'm just worried, it's kind of like what we do with solar panel installations. We like to have an out plan in case the solar panel company goes belly up, or they decide to, vacate the property and head to Alaska. And it's just nice that there's a decommissioning plan for that tower, rather than have a situation where there's an ugly tower standing there on that property and no one cares anymore. And I'm not sure we've resolved that, because I'm not sure we have any way to. So maybe I'm pushing the button too hard on this one, but.
I would just point out, just want to emphasize what I had said in the memo about making a determination that this aligns with the comprehensive plan. Just because it's not directly adjacent to any S&PS, and so I think it's important to do that if you're going to recommend approval.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? Questions? I guess for now, Andy, you can be seated. We'll open this up for public comments, just see what we get in that direction. So I will open this for public comments, either in the room or on Zoom. Sir, I saw your hand first, so come on up, introduce yourself, and just let us know your thoughts on this.
Well, my name is David Craig, and we have the property on the corner of Grandview Avenue and Broadway, Craigville Estates. We've been there 52 years. I was at the planning board meeting when they gave this to expand it, when Mr. King was expanding the radio station. And Dr. Marowitz was on the thing, and there were some other people from the area. And he came up with what he called spot zoning, which allowed the radio station to build a little bit onto their building to expand where they was at, remaining as a radio station, but that when the radio station ceased to exist, so did that zoning. And his spokesman said at that time that and this is going on back 30 years, that his thoughts were that Mr. King's plan was to, when he was done with the radio station, to give that land to the school department. All good. Long time's been there, they've been great neighbors. My big concern, and I don't want to stop development of that property, it's a nice piece of property, I understand things are growing, but the traffic. Across the street from this, I believe you've approved a 60-unit housing development. That's a lot of cars every day with UPS, FedEx, people coming, going, everything else. Now, right across the street from that, this piece that we're talking about, you're talking about putting in something that could be even more. We have no sidewalk. The traffic in the morning is backed up from the traffic light on Grandview up past the radio station, and sometimes in both directions. We had to put, and that's up to us, we was fortunate. We put a driveway, because you can't take a left-hand turn onto Broadway on that side of the road. We put a driveway down the back, we come out to Grandview Avenue, and we use the light. We can do that. But my concern is, and you have a lot of people that are now walking alongside of the road, and these aren't young people, that are using the health facility, St. Joe's up the road. I watch them and I go, man, and that they have to do that, both sides of the road. So, but there's no sidewalk, and I'm all for development. But what are we gonna do about the traffic? How are we gonna handle that? If you take and add 300 plus cars a day, now, right here, no light. If you make a right-hand turn only, what are they gonna do? They're gonna go up and use the hospital. You put in a turn lane, now people gotta go across 2 lanes or whatever to make it. I don't know. I watch accidents all the time right there. That's my entertainment in the evening. If you go by, I'm sitting on my front steps around 5, 6 o'clock, and I see an awful lot of them. And not bad ones, thank God. But there are accidents, and there has been serious accidents here. There's been people killed. So my concern as to what they're gonna do, I'm all for developing it. I know Bangor's gonna grow. I get that. I'm not saying it needs to be a green space or any of that. He has a right to do, but where can the traffic go? Can it come out onto the high school? That belongs to the school department, I believe, that school street there. So there's no way to divert that traffic. And I'm all for a change. But whatever that is, not just me. I happen to be the only one here, I guess, in the neighborhood, but I know a lot of other people have the concern.
Sure.
Been there 52 years, so there's not many of the originals left. I don't think there's any.
Thank you for your comments. I sort of anticipated, I think probably most of the board members anticipated that sort of concern. Almost every time we have something on Broadway come up, somebody brings up the traffic issue. And city engineer Jefferson Davis is here, and he may want to speak on this a little bit, but the way it typically works through this process is when we have a zone change, we're really not to the point then, which is tonight, where we address the traffic situation. That generally comes up in the land development permit project process, which is the second step. Typically, once somebody decides what they might want to do with this particular piece of property. And then depending upon what they do, there are rules on what sort of traffic considerations and possibly studies, and some of which we're actually going to talk about with other projects tonight. So we address it as best as we can, given all of the projects and all of the properties that are already there, and try and handle it that way. So it's not ignored, and we certainly care.
It's not ignored, but once you change the zoning to that, it opens the door for now the zoning for this piece of property is what you're asking to do with it, is a big window of what can be done with it. And that is my concern.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Did you want to comment at all about that, Jefferson?
I think the only thing I'd add is it also opens the door for a developer to help mitigate some of that issues that we have up there. If they, if we fall into a development that needs a DOT traffic movement permit, through that scoping meeting, we can ask the developer to help mitigate some of that concern through, if it's a traffic signal, maybe, I don't know what type of development it would be, or anything with left turn lanes. Because left turn lanes are meant so you don't have to drive across into the lane, you drive out, pull in, and then go when it's safe. And So, I guess only other thing I would add is, the city has plans to construct sidewalk along that section. It's a needed area. So we're, constantly thinking about that. And, there's no construction right now of it, but it is in our, study group that we have. So,
Thank you. I think in the past, I feel that Engineer Terrio may have also brought up some studies of maybe a little further out on Broadway and how to resolve some of the issues that are happening out there with traffic. I don't know if any of that is in the works, or you have any knowledge of any of that going on, or,
are you talking about out of Broadway?
right?
I think there's nothing currently being studied.
Okay.
It's been a while since anything's happened. I'm trying to remember if Bax has done anything recently, but
Yep.
no, I think it's been quite a while.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, yeah, okay, thank you.
I just want to add, because they both made good points. Just want to add, we talked about this in the planning board training, that the zoning really is kind of what guides development. And so you do need to think about the potential implications for when you are going to a zone that has many different uses from what's there. But, in addition to looking at the comprehensive plan, you should also look at, like we've talked about with a lot of the changes from URD1 to URD2, what are the community benefits versus impacts? Does it provide a greater benefit to the community to have this zone changed in the middle of zones that aren't like it? Does that outweigh, the impacts that it might have in the adjacent community? So those are just some thoughts to take into consideration.
Thank you. I still have time for any more public comments. If there are any, I see no raised hands. No raised hands on Zoom. I see no one else in the room interested in speaking. I'm going to close the public comments on this item. Any other further comments from the board or any discussion before we go to possible motion? No? I would look for a motion on this. Typically, we would go on ought to pass. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move that we recommend that the city council approve the zone change at 861 Broadway, map lot 41-005 from contract and industry service district and low-density residential district to a shopping and personal service district.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Hume, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, and I will note that in light of Planning Officer Collette's comments, I certainly do, and I assume that the other board members maybe felt this, although they didn't say it directly. I do believe that this corridor of Broadway is indicated in the comprehensive plan to be developed in this way, where the shopping and personal service district applies and seems to apply, in my mind, well to this area. I do sympathize with the traffic concerns that our member of the public brought up. I think we see that every time there is something going on Broadway. And I think the city needs to be very cognizant of that and continue to try and alleviate those traffic concerns as much as possible. But I don't see it being enough to completely block the project from proceeding to the next step. Any other board members have comments that they want to add before we move on? Member
Just a
Jones?
quick one. I think the only other zone that it could be, to be contiguous with what's around it is the GNISD, and I don't think that that's appropriate for anything other than, as our member of the public mentioned, potential transfer to the Bangor School Department. So I think this is the option that we have on this particular piece of property, so. And I 100% agree with the concerns about the traffic on Broadway.
Yeah.
I'm usually the one that brings it up, so.
Okay, thank you. That we have approved this. It is a recommendation to the city council of ought to pass. That means that the next step before this goes any further is it goes to the city council at their next meeting, which would be next Monday evening at 7 o'clock. And they will then vote on this and have the right to rebuke us if they decide to. And that is all for that item. Thank you for your attention and coming. So that gets us to the zone change item on the agenda this evening. Moving on to the next item of new business, we have a land development permit application. Before we begin permit reviews, so the two permits that are before us this evening, code requires that we have, that if we don't have 7 board members in attendance this evening, which we do not, we have 6, code requires us to give you the option to postpone this decision this evening until a meeting of a later date. And the reason is, statistically, 4 votes are still required in the affirmative in order to pass the item. So if there's 7 members, it could be 4 and 3, and it would still pass. If there's 6 members, which there are this evening, it would have to be 4 to 2 or better for it to pass. And so before we go through a long process, I have to give you the option, the 2 applicants this evening for these 2 projects, to say that you would like to proceed. I don't know that we've ever had anyone say no, but code does require us to ask that. So I'm assuming you would like to proceed?
I would like to proceed, yes.
Thank you.
We'll proceed also.
Thank you.
Compass Health.
Okay, thank you. So I've gotten affirmative from both applicants this evening. They would like to proceed, despite the fact that we have 1 less than the full attendance of board members. So with that in mind, before you start with your presentation, staff has indicated completeness of this application. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce the project. The land development permit application and the minor site development plan that we were looking at first is for replacement of existing concrete retaining wall and wood retaining walls with ready rock retaining walls and paving to the new walls at a property located at 136 Union Street, which is map lot 042-035. It's in the Government and Institutional Service District, in Multifamily and Service District, and the applicant/owner is Community Care. Staff has indicated the completeness of this application and that it is ready for board review. The applicant's standing has been confirmed. Does the board have any concerns about these issues, or are there any issues of conflict of interests? And seeing none, I would like a motion on completeness of this application. If someone would like to give us a motion on that, I'd appreciate it. And that's right in the procedural background of your packet. If you're Member Jonas, thank you.
Chair, I move the board finds that the application was deemed complete on February 18th, 2025, that the applicant paid all applicable fees per Exhibit 3 in our packets, and the proposed project is a minor site development.
Thank you. Member Boucher, did you want to second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. And so roll call vote on the member completeness. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jones?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So with that all being done, please proceed with your
Thank you, Mr.
presentation.
Chair. I appreciate it. Lucy Feeney, I'm a civil engineer with Haley Ward. I'm here tonight on behalf of Community Care. As Mr. Chair briefly went through, this project is located at 136 Union Street. It's right at the intersection of First Street and Union Street, directly adjacent to the Brick Church. The applicant tonight is looking to do some site improvements. There are 2 existing retaining walls on site that are currently failing. They would like to replace those walls with Ready Rock, which is block retaining walls that kind of stack up on each other going down the length of the wall. Associated with that would be some updated paving to help direct stormwater to some minor changes on site. There's also some street trees proposed along Union Street. And I think that's really it, honestly. Just to give you guys some quick context on the plan, the largest retaining wall is at the intersection of Union and First Street. This one is the existing concrete retaining wall, which again will be replaced with the Ready Rock. And then on the westerly side of the site, there is a small wooden retaining wall that, like I mentioned, is failing, and that will also be replaced with the Ready Rock. We'll see some proposed trees along Union Street. And there's also an existing catch basin that ties into the city system on First Street. We're proposing a replacement of that structure and new piping into that pipe on First Street. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, Liz, thank you. Staff comments first? Nothing? Board member questions for the applicants? Everyone knows what Ready Rock is?
I know I said that, I was like, oh.
I thought I did, but I had to look it up just to be sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Liz, you can sit if there are no further board member comments, and I'll open it up to the public.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. So I open this project up for public comments. And I'm seeing a shake of head in the room, and raise of hand on Zoom if you'd like to comment on this project. And I see no raising of hands, so I'm going to close the project to public comment. Again, board members, any concerns, any questions? If not, I think we can move right to the standards. And so I would look for a motion on number one on part one before you get there. Part one is a requirement that the project meets the articles 2 through 12 of the code. Member Boucher, did you want to give us a motion on that first item?
I move that the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, and 12, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code section 165-1, Section 165-19's requirements regarding non-conforming parking.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Brush, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval of item 1. Item 2 of part 1, do I have a motion on that one? Member Hume?
Yes, Chair, I move that the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 8, 12, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code 165-33 requirements regarding filling, grading, and earth moving activities, and 165-33.1 requirements regarding erosion and sediment control best practices.
Thank you. Member Brush, did you want to second?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 2 of part 1. Can I have a motion on item 3 of part 1? Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 12, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code section 165-72 requiring adequate parking, section 165-73 requiring adequate parking area location, setbacks and screening, and section 165-74 regarding minimum design standards for surface parking and parking lot design.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Hume? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 3 of part 1. Can I have a motion on item 4 of part 1? Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 12, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, section 165-84, requiring provisions for surface water and storm drainage.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of all 4 items of Part 1. Moving on to Part 2, which requires the project to meet the district's site development standards under Article 19. Can I have a motion on this one? Member Jonas, I have your hand first.
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 12, the applicant satisfied Section 165-135 of the Land Development Code regarding the impervious surface ratio and buffer yards.
Thank you. Member Boucher, did you want to
Second.
second that? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of Part 2. Moving on to Part 3, which requires the project to meet Section 165-114 of the Land Development Approval Standards. Can I have a motion on that first item? Member Boucher?
Yes, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 12, the applicant satisfied the requirements of Land Development Code, Section 165-114B through C, regarding the proposed public right-of-way.
No.
Nope,
Skip the line.
I skipped a line. I'm reading it off my phone, and it's very small. As I was saying, regarding the proposed parking and loading layout and the proposed access drives from the site, any public right-of-way being arranged in a reasonable and safe configuration, including the provision of safe pedestrian travel to all on-site uses.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes. Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of Item 1 of Part 3. Can I have a motion on Item 2 of Part 3? Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 8, and 12, the applicants satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114D's requirements for preventing adverse effects from stormwater runoff and ensuring adequate capacity of stormwater collection systems to handle runoff from the development.
Thank you. And a second on this one, Member Hughes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That's unanimous approval of Item 2 of Part 3. Moving on to Item 3 of Part 3. Can I have a motion on this one? Member Jonas, thank you.
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 8, and 12, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114F's requirements for landscaping and species type.
Thank you. A second on this one. Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So that was unanimous approval of all of the standards up to the decision. So we have the decision. I would like a motion on that decision if I could. Member Hume?
Yeah, Chair, I move that the board finds that the project meets the requirements for a land development permit for a minor site development and therefore grants the land development permit for the proposed project.
Thank you. And a second on this one? Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All unanimous approval of your application.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is another land development permit. This is an application and major site development plan and a site location of development application or SLODA. Jim, for construction of a single-story phase rehabilitation hospital with a floor area of 79,388 square feet. It is at 1017 Union Street, map lot R24-017, in the Government and Institutional Service District. The applicant is Encompass Health Maine Real Estate LLC. The owner is Union Street Associates. Before we get to Mr. Kaiser, the staff has indicated the completeness of this application and that it is ready for board review. Fees are documented and have been paid. The applicant's standing is also confirmed. Deeds are in the packet. Does the board have any concerns about any of these issues or any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, I would look for a motion on accepting the completeness. Member Boucher?
I move the application was deemed complete on February 18, 2025,
Yeah,
That the applicant paid all applicable fees, see exhibit 4 and 5, and that the proposed project is a major site development site location, site location of development application, MRS Title 38, Section 484.
Yeah, thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Hume, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so we're good with having the applicant present this project to us this evening. Hi, Jim.
Hi. Thank you very much. My name is Jim Kaiser. I'm here representing Encompass Health. On the Zoom meeting attendance, we have Elizabeth Mann with Encompass Health and Edmund Ball with Encompass Health also to assist if we need them. That was a good introduction as far as where the property is. This property is located in behind the development, which includes Midas, the Concord bus station, and the other Wendy's and the other stores down along there, and abuts the airport mall. It's been a driving range in the past. That hasn't been in business for several years now, but I think everybody's been kind of seeing that and eyeing it for development, and it's had some perks to it that enticed development, but it really needed somebody of some stature, and Compass Health came along, and I think they're the right thing. The zone change was given to allow them to move forward early last year, and we've got to the point now where we've got plans developed, gone through staff review, and feel we've got a good project for the city in the long run. The property is 17 and a half acres. It's almost entirely open fields at the current time. There is some remnants of the driving range out there still, if you can see it below all the snow. But the proposal is to build an 80-bed rehabilitation hospital in 2 phases, 50 beds in the first phase, 30 beds in the second phase, with a couple of years in between the 2 phases. From that standpoint, this is on city water and city sewer. The water supply out there is very good, as you've noted in the letter from the water district. The sewer has capacity, as noted in the sewer letter that we provided in from the site. The development itself provides a circular area, as you can see, directly around the entire building, so it's got good approach for life safety requirements, because there will be ambulance. There is 3 kind of locations on the building front that would accommodate delivery of service. These won't be emergency services per se in the norm. There'll be transport ambulances from the hospitals over to the rehabilitation hospital. There is 160 parking spaces, which is more than what's required by the city. It complies with Encompass Health standards, and as they see that they need their parking for this type of facility. So that also provides ample parking for both guests, patients on a limited basis, and then staff overall. The total developed area is approximately 9.7 acres with impervious area of 4.8 acres. To control that, we've created a pond in the lower left area as you're looking at the, well, and this one is actually the top left area, to control runoff to pre-developed rates, and also to provide treatment because we're in the watershed of Birch Stream, which is an urban impaired stream within the city. So we have to provide both treatment and runoff attenuation. That's done through that pond, which receives almost the entire paved and impervious area of the facility. So we've got that set up for that end of it. This has also got a fairly large wetland crossing in the front. That's been a tough part about getting this project and any project on this land going, was because of the amount of wetland impacts that's associated with that. So with close to half an acre of wetland impacts and the fees that are going to be paid to the state, because of that, to offset impacts, it makes it very difficult, and that impact fee is quite large. And then on top of it, there's an impact fee because of the size of the project for Birch Stream. So there's a lot of situations with really called in a strong entity such as Encompass Health for this property.
Jim, is that wetland, the area on the bottom left of this,
Excuse me?
is that wetland that you're speaking
Yes,
of? That's the
yes.
bottom left area?
That kind of polka dotted
Yeah.
area is all wetland.
That's all wetland.
Yeah, that's really about the only, there's a little bit in the back, right in the middle back, and a little bit on the bottom corner of that screenshot there. But that's the only area we're impacting on this development. So to get through there, and then on top of those, that activity, there's a need to improve the intersection because that's a lighted intersection. So you have to go through that whole design, which we did a traffic study that was reviewed by city staff and MDOT staff. John Terrio, former engineer here, has reviewed it with his vast experience on it and worked out some details with the city public works and engineering department to make sure that complies with everything that they need out there. So that works well overall. And so that will be implemented as part of this, so that will become a four-way intersection as this development gets hold in the ground. So as I said, this will be 2 phases. The completion date of phase 1 is targeted for '27, and then looking at current construction phase for phase 2 would be in 2028 timeframe. And I think the development requirements through the planning staff puts a timeline on that without coming back and getting some further approvals with the board on that. So I think with that, we would be happy to answer any questions the board has at this time or after the public hearing is done. We look forward to trying to answer everything we can for you.
Excellent, thanks, Jim. Staff comments before we get to any board member questions?
I'll just point out, in your memo, I had discussed a condition on the developer's traffic engineer assessing the operation of their new intersection after the facility's been open for 6 months, and that is in your draft findings document already. So
I did see that, thank you. Could you comment on why that's required?
I think Jeff could comment.
Well, this doesn't meet a traffic movement permit of the state, so there's no conditions, there's no permanent conditions involved in that, but we thought, there's no phase-in changes with this right now. They're adding the 4th leg, and they're adding a pedestrian phase, but the timing itself is staying. So, in accordance to their preliminary assessment and some comments that we had them, some questions we had them look at, we don't think right now it's needed, but we thought maybe after 6 months, they could assess it and see if there is any timing changes that need to happen to make that run a little smoother. And actually, their traffic engineer originally proposed that in their original assessment in '23.
Okay.
So we think that's a good idea.
Okay, good, thank you.
If you don't mind, that's good standard practice on those, when you're doing an intersection like that, to see actually how you design it and see how it's actually operating in real life to make sure that the two sync up together on
Sure, that
it.
makes
So we
sense.
have no problem with that.
Yeah, I just don't remember us ever doing that as a condition, so, but that's good. Member Jonas?
Just a quick question though, won't it change again once the second phase goes online?
The way it's designed is to accommodate both phases up front.
Right. I know.
So at the first phase, it should work well under that phase. We believe in the design that it'll accommodate both phases. But if there's a further condition after phase 2, I think that's not really a problem with us either from that standpoint.
I think if it becomes a problem, we're gonna hear about it anyway, so.
So it's the timing of it, that was actually one of my other questions, was the timing of it is after the first phase is done. 6 months after that is when we would do this.
And another assessment of it. They've already assessed it once.
Right,
You know,
but there would be the other assessment.
And they ran the model, so.
Okay, thank you.
But they're also upgrading the cabinet for us. They're adding one mast arm, but they're upgrading some signage for us. They're putting the high vis yellow border around the existing traffic signals for us, so they're going above and beyond what they need to do for this. So
Excellent.
It's actually two mast arms we have to replace, because one has to come down, and that won't meet requirements nowadays, so they have to upgrade that one to replace it, so.
Okay, good. Member Hume?
Yeah, I just like to say that this project is sorely needed. Since East Remain Medical Center closed their rehab unit, rehab hospital beds have been non-existent in this area. You have to go to Portland to find them. There are plenty of skilled nursing beds, but not rehab hospital beds.
I
Member
just have a quick
Jonas?
question about the phases. You said the first phase would be 50 beds, and the second phase would be, the drawing
30
says
beds.
40, but it'll be 30?
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up.
Okay,
I mean, it's okay that you did, but I noticed that as well. The drawings say 40 in the second phase, so I would want that to be
That was
changed.
just a slip up on it. We had it at 40 at one point in time, then it was back down to 30, and I probably just missed that one spot on there. I know we had a couple, I think. was
I think it's
pointed out in the review.
more than
that
one of the
kinda-
drawings.
You make one of the drawings.
No, in more than one of the
Oh, in more
drawings,
than
so
one.
I would check all.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the landscape drawing right now, and I see it there, but I noticed it on the first drawing as well, so,
You could add a condition that
That's
they
what I
make
would-
that change and submit modified
yeah,
plans.
that's what I would prefer to do, so we'll just make that a condition. So
Yeah, the
like I
landscape
said-
plan went out when it was still at 40, so.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think he changed the building work, the design on the building.
Yeah, and the general description that you had and a lot of the other documents said 30, but the drawings do say 40. So thank you for that, Member Jonas.
Yeah, I see that on the building itself, says that, yeah.
I have a couple other questions. The property backs up to the seniors facility to the east and condos kind of to the south of the property off. Both of those are off Ohio Street. I'm not sure I recall for sure, but I think Planning Officer Clyde told us last time that we cannot put restrictions on noise levels and hours of construction. Did you tell us that once upon a time?
I'm trying to refresh my memory.
Well, while you're trying to refresh your memory, do you plan on restrictions, noise restrictions, why not? Because you're,
We haven't at this point in time, I don't think that's been posed. I think once the full plans get developed and the contractors are fully on board and stuff like that, we can go over that. I mean, nowadays, it's not, at least been my experience with a lot of the contractors nowadays, that they're really working just the standard hours because there's a lot of work, but they're, I believe, trying to protect their employees from getting burnt out and too much. So they're really staying as much towards the limited hours or the standard hours, I should say, as you can. They might work 10-hour days in the summertime or whatever, but I don't think you'd see weekend, Saturday, maybe Saturday, but not a lot. Sunday, probably not at all, but we could entertain that from that standpoint.
yeah, I mean, the two things I would anticipate we would hear about later on is noise and dust issues from those two properties because they're so close.
So I think what we had discussed before was that you can request a condition, but in this case, since it's permitted by right, the applicant needs to agree to that condition. If it were a conditional use, you would have a little bit more leeway in that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all right with good faith on just, you know, but I think it's important, and if you wouldn't mind expressing that to the client, that, you know, I mean, it's a senior facility, you know, over on
Yeah.
Ohio, which is right there.
Yeah.
I think they have 300 residents or something like that, and then there's the condos just below that, so.
Yeah.
That could become a potential issue. The other question I had was there was a comment in the soil report that suggested site drainage work should be done as early in the project as possible due to the wet soil and the wetlands conditions, I think that we spoke of earlier. Is that planned to be accomplished early in the project schedule? Or can you
The
even say?
wetland work will be done because that's our way in to the site. So you're gonna see that work is done rather quickly, because that's the only way in. I think that when it comes down to it, they're gonna have to come in from Union Street, so there's gonna be a short period of impact on Union Street. Well, till they break in and get some gravel placed and start getting some work to continue into the site to get in there. So I think you'll see that in the first phase, because it's, or first steps, because it is the only way into the project from that standpoint. We have the secondary access, but that's restricted, if you read the easement in there, that's restricted to just passenger vehicles. So we can't necessarily take the heavy construction equipment in through there, so that area through the wetlands is gonna be very high on the list of priorities to get into the site.
How about the sedimentation pond?
We don't have that mapped out on it necessarily right up front. I think the way this site is designed, they will need some fill in this, and I do anticipate that that's a portion of that area is gonna be utilized for that. I think we have more fill on the site than we do have cuts, so I think you'll see that comes out, and they're gonna be utilizing whatever they can on site before they haul in, at least to get up to subgrade before the gravel structural materials come in. And there's a lot of earthwork or a lot of piping that has to go in too, so that will, once they get into the site, I think, and establish their pads inside, you're gonna see a lot of the underground utilities start going in from that standpoint, so.
Which kind of makes sense, cut and fill and all that sort of thing, but I mean, maybe you have thoughts on that, but just the solar report was pretty clear that getting this stuff done ahead of time was wise, and I think what we've seen in the past is that complaints happen when that doesn't get done, and then there's a nasty storm or something, all of a sudden you've got, an ugly site with a lot of mud.
I anticipate that there's gonna be a lot of eyes on it with Birch Stream out there, so I think that is gonna be an important aspect to kind of maintain that through. I think there's, sometimes it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because if you get in there too early and strip it early enough that we're still getting some weather and everything's wet, it kind of compounds thing, whereas if you kind of open up more of the area when it's drier, you get a little bit of dust, but you don't get that catastrophic mudness that kind of lingers with the state, so.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I'm gonna go to public comments, so you can relax for a minute, and so I'll open this up to public comments. Sir, if you want to come up and introduce yourself, I'd be happy to listen.
So, for those that don't know me, I'm Dr. Peter Keebler. I am a resident of Bangor for almost 29 years, 3 months more, and I'll be 29. And I've been working in the field of rehab, including inpatient rehab work and facilities for over 40 years. And this started as a resident fellow in training at New York University, and then as a faculty member of the medical school at the University of Cincinnati, where I also was the founder and the first chair of the pediatric rehab inpatient program at Children's Hospital Medical Center there. In the last 29 years, or almost 29 years, I've been here in Bangor, and I have been the head of the rehab program at Northern Light Eastern Maine Medical Center. And so, speaking to a comment here about the need for inpatient rehab, I am not here to speak against the need for this service, but you've asked me to say right up front whether I'm for or against this, and what I have to say is I would like a little more clarification, if I can ask for that, as to exactly the nature of the facility and what patients will be seen, because that will predicate my further comments.
Okay.
So my question would be, and I understand there are people here, maybe you can answer this. I'm making the presumption that this facility is similar to the Encompass facility in Portland, in which this is a facility for hospital level acute rehab known to the Medicare folks as an IRF. I want to clarify if the number of beds we're talking about is for IRF, not SNF, or combination of IRF and SNF. So can you answer that for me?
And what we'll do is, just for the sake of
Yes.
keeping this meeting under control.
Sure.
So you can ask your questions through us, the
Okay.
chair, And then we'll let Jim figure out if there's anyone on his team this evening who could answer that question. I'm not sure that question really affects our final decision this evening, but I like that you're here and that the public has questions like this, so we'll see what we can do to answer it.
And before I go further, I should have full disclosure. I'm still an employee of Eastern Maine Medical Center.
Sure.
I'm still the head of the rehab program. And I'm also a member of the Bangor Historic Preservation Commission, which I don't think is germane to the issues we have here, but as full disclosure, I thought I would mention that.
Yep.
So back to my sort of question about this will really determine my comments from here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, Member Jonas, did you have a
Just a
comment?
quick question. Could you explain what INF and?
IRF.
IRF.
It's a Medicare designation of an inpatient rehab facility.
And
It is different than an SNF, which is a skilled nursing facility.
Okay.
So the difference is that an IRF is classed by Medicare as an acute hospital. It's reimbursed as an acute hospital versus a skilled nursing facility, of which we have some in the community, of course, like Ross Manor and others, which is a skilled nursing facility, which also may have long-term beds in it. Skilled nursing facilities are required by the regulation to provide rehabilitation services, though those rehabilitation services that are required there are not at the intensive level and scope of an IRF or inpatient rehab facility level, which is the hospital-based rehab, which is what the unit at Eastern Maine Medical Center had been before it closed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kaiser, do you have someone on your team that could answer this question?
I'm sure there is.
Okay.
You know, I myself cannot.
No, I didn't figure you could.
That's beyond me. If Edmund or Elizabeth want to.
We would ask them to raise.
Edmund is about ready to speak, so.
Yeah, okay, good. So we'll bring him in. So if Edmund could be brought in, that'd be great.
You can't restrict their license. That's what he's.
Edmund?
I think he's working on
Oh, we lost him.
You lost him.
Oh, no, he's.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay, great. My name's Edmund Ball. I'm with Encompass Health. I'm the Chief Real Estate Officer based in Birmingham, Alabama. Wish we could be up there today, just wasn't able to make the logistics work, but appreciate the question from Dr. Keebler. I can answer that question directly. This would be all inpatient IRF patients, as you refer to them as, but just for the panel's purposes, just inpatient rehabilitation facility.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mann. You said you had more questions possibly depending upon his answer?
No, comments.
Okay,
in terms of that. And I also have other things that may or may not be pertinent for the planning board. So I'll have you help me if I'm asking a question that's outside the bounds of what is the planning board's purview, as we deal with the HPC all the time.
Yep.
So to respond then after that comment, I will say that I'm against this proposal. And the reason for this is that as a healthcare professional who's worked in this area for over 40 years, and having been the person in charge of Eastern Maine Medical Center's acute rehab unit, which is the same services that they will be providing, and covering what I presume will be the same catchment area, we at the Eastern Maine Medical Center's acute rehab unit, hospital-based unit, covered everywhere from the closest units were north in Presque Isle of 6 beds, and south into Augusta, which still has acute rehab, by the way. And so having said that, my concern is that we don't overbuild healthcare facilities, as we should all be very concerned about healthcare costs, and whether we are building facilities that create a greater degree of service than is required. And so my concern, based on what I believe would be the purview of the planning board, based on all of the other pieces that go into this for the zoning and the runoffs and all those things, is the size of the facility, which is of course predicated upon the number of beds it serves. A couple years ago, there was a blurb that came out about after we closed the rehab unit at Eastern Maine, which was incredibly unfortunate because it was closed due to personnel problems given from the pandemic. It wasn't because the service wasn't needed, and as I said, I'm not here to speak against the need for this service. That is very clear, and I'm about the strongest proponent there could be of that. But my concern is the size. In our unit, over my years here, when I came on board, our unit was 17 beds. We built that over time to a total of 36. But over time, Medicare's criteria for admission into this level rehab, and Medicare is the regulating body for the IRF, meaning that if this is an IRF facility, they must get approval from Medicare to have this status as acute level hospital that does rehab. When I say acute level hospital, just to be clear, acute level hospital at East Bay Medical Center means everything from the trauma service, ED, and everything else. We're talking about a special designation that Medicare does for rehab facilities at this level of intensity. In order to have this, there needs to be a certain criteria met for patients admitted to this unit. They have to have the need great enough for the intensity of care. They have to have the potential to improve with the rehabilitation treatment, because Medicare is not interested in paying for patients to go through care that either don't need that level of care or don't have potential to improve with that care. Having said that, over the years, the criteria for admission has become more and more stringent. At Eastern Maine Medical Center, as we have served this entire area in a rehabilitation inpatient facility that was around for over 50 years. Well established, all of our referrals came from all of the hospitals that are in this area, which will of course also be referrals that would go to the Encompass facility. We had to drop our bed size from 36 and we ended up at 26 because we couldn't fill the beds if we were maintaining and utilizing the criteria that Medicare has. So our census was approximately 19 or 20 at the time that the unit was closed. Okay, so we had 26 beds. We only had about 19 to 20 patients at one time. When I heard that Encompass was interested in building an acute rehab facility in Bangor of 50 beds, you can imagine that given my experience in this area and providing the inpatient IRF level acute rehab for years here, I was flabbergasted to see a 50-bed unit. And actually a little more surprised when I just learned that it's now moved up to 80. So my concern is whether this facility is simply larger than what the need is. And that need is, the reality is that in rehab, of course, we have an aging population. I think Maine has the oldest population in Maine, in the nation. And we're not getting younger. And that means me either, frankly. But my point is that chronic disease, disability, and other non-chronic diseases that lead to disabilities like strokes, et cetera, are, certainly on the rise. But again, not only Medicare's requirements for admission to the unit, but also any private insurers may have their own special requirements before they prior approve for patients to come in. And so having been in this business and on the waning aspect of the patients we would be able to bring into this unit, we've had to contract services over time. And so my concern is, again, not with the service at all. It's whether the scope of this is significantly greater than we should be doing. We certainly don't want to bring in a big development situation and see it fail. Now, Encompass is a huge, nationally based for-profit organization, as I understand. I believe they have over 160 or more of these sorts of facilities across the nation. We would hope that they would not fail and that they would be doing their due diligence in determining the size of the need. But I can say that with my experience here, I really just don't see that. And I'd hate to be in a situation where, you know, we are building a large facility that does not have, is partially empty or largely empty. And that we've done all this resource and everything else that's there. So that would be my comment, what I think is probably most germane to the planning board's issues, because I presume these issues would be things that you would be concerned about as well in terms of development and possibly overdevelopment. I do have other comments, but I'm not sure they're all within the purview of this group. And I mean, I can tell you a little bit about some of my concerns, and it may not be the purview of this group, but I'll leave it there. And
Yeah, well, I
give you
mean,
an
we've taken quite a lot of
opportunity.
time already, and
Yes, I
I
have.
don't want to chew up too much time with things that we really don't have any control over. So if you want to take just a minute or so and kind of hit the highlights of what it is your other concerns are, then maybe we can bring it up more if we need to, or otherwise just suggest that you get together with either Mr. Kaiser or a representative from Encompass who might be able to answer your questions for us.
I can enumerate very quickly, and again, they may not be appropriate in this group. First is our pool of healthcare professionals in this area is quite small. Rehab is a largely labor-driven process. We have physicians, nurses' aides, you have physical, occupational, and speech therapists, social workers, case managers, et cetera, et cetera. And my question would be, with a facility particularly of this size, you know, do we have the support to actually do this? And has Encompass reached out to any of the hospitals or skilled nursing facilities in the area that are staffed with these people in terms of the negative impact there may be on the existing facilities and not having enough staff? Having had our inpatient unit closed because of not enough staff, that is of particular concern. And so that is one concern. Another question is, based on Encompass being a for-profit organization, that would mean that their profits their income comes from payments for patient care. And so my question would be, in terms of answering the need for this service in this community, what is their policy in admitting self-pay patients or Medicaid patients? Because those patients do not pay. And indeed, those are difficult loss leaders, if you will, from a financial perspective to keeping our unit alive, what it was when we had our unit going. And those patients are still here and of need. Some of the highest resource patients, patients needing the highest resources and care, are often trauma victims. And unfortunately, that population has a greater proportion of non-pay or self-pay sort of support. And so my concern is just from a community perspective, from a health professional perspective, what would be Encompass's commitment and policy towards admitting those patients and providing them care, even though they would not have the same level of financial revenue, which is, of course, what they're in the business to get. So that would be the other question that I would have for that. And I think that's really it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Absolutely.
I will allow other board members to speak to Mr. Keebler's concerns, but I'll start and just say, it seems like most of the things that you were touching on, I mean, our purpose here this evening as a planning board is to determine if this project meets the city's codes and standards. And as I said earlier, you know, I like having public comment. I think public comment is important to our process. We're demanded by the code to hear public comment for that reason. But the things that you have hit upon, from what I can tell, are more directed at how Encompass is going to run their business. You know, whether they have enough staffing, whether they're going to accept patients other than certain types of patients, how big are they going to be? And I know you're well aware at this point that it's a two-phase project, so they're probably anticipating seeing how phase one goes before they get to phase two. But nonetheless, there's a certain amount of, you know, they've got to figure out how to run their own business, as you mentioned, so that they can be profitable. And yet they have done this in 160 or 70 other places in the country, as you pointed out, and seem to have been quite successful at it so far. So I don't see that those things are really in our purview from the planning board perspective. Although I think we probably all share to some extent those same kind of concerns. I want to see them be successful. I don't want to see this business come to Bangor and then end up being a mud hole down back where the golf driving range used to be because it didn't work out. That's not good for anybody. So certainly we want to see them be successful. So with that being said, board members have any comments on that? Member Hume?
Yeah, my only comment is, and I happen to be in this field,
I know that.
is that we're not a certificate of need board, and the Department of Health should be addressing those kinds of issues.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Kaiser, do you want to either with your team or yourself make any further comments on these issues or not? I'm not demanding that you do.
I don't think that anything needs. I mean, there were
Yep.
discussion topics,
Yep.
mostly not relative to what we're here for this evening. I mean, I'm sure it's been heard and there's probably answers to almost
To
all
all
of
those,
them.
yes.
And,
Yep.
but.
It's
I don't
outside the
think it's-
purview of this.
I don't think that's what we're here to work on
Yep.
tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Any other public comments or questions before we move on? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comments on this project. And Jim, you're back up. Is there something else you wanted to
No,
bring?
I'm just getting ready if you have any questions.
Okay, we're going to go to standards, so it's going to be a bit of a
I noticed that
Yeah.
earlier.
yeah, and this one's a long one.
I noticed that too.
But before we get there, do board members have any other concerns, that they would like to bring up before we go through the standards? And Member Jones,
Sorry, I
please.
just want to, I did read through the parking studies or the traffic studies pretty thoroughly because I'm really concerned about this area. I frequent this area almost daily, so I understand things and I really, so I guess the only question I wanted to ask is at the 50-bed phase one, what kind of staff would be involved? How many staff would expected to be coming?
I'd be going from memory. I know Edmund would probably have that, but my memory is around 70. And we went over this when we went through the zone change with council. That was in our brochure. I don't think you were on the board at the time when we went through the zone change.
I was on the board, yes, I was.
You were?
But I don't remember the
It was
number.
noted there, and off the top of my head, we were talking about it earlier, but I have the information back in my office, but I don't have it here.
So it's almost one person per bed, one staff per bed.
Yeah, that's counting administrative
Yeah.
and service and all that,
Okay,
so.
I was just curious.
The important part is how many are on site at one time, not just the whole staff.
Thank you.
Excuse me?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
coming in at
important
once?
part is- Yeah, how many?
Well,
That's the
yeah, that
important
was
part.
discussed too. I mean, the daytime is the highest use activity because you have all the service. And
No,
when
I
you
was
go in
just
overnight,
stating that for.
yeah, it goes down obviously with the evening hours and stuff, so. But the light is set up so that it's generated on hospital movement, so it's very similar in that nature and they think, from their best estimates, they've got it in the best situation they can have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with all that being said, let's move to the standards. So, board members, I'll take your attention to part one of the provisions and findings, which requires the project to meet the requirements of Articles 2 through 12. And I'd look for a motion on item 1. Member Hume?
Chair, I move that the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 21, 56, 59, 60, and 62, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code 165-33's requirements regarding filling, grading, and earth-moving activities, and 165-33.1's requirements regarding erosion and sediment control best practices.
Thank you. Second on this, Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote, Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, unanimous approval of item 1. Can I have a motion on item 2? Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 55, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-66 requiring a transitional yard for the rear lot line of a lot in the government and institutional district which abuts a residential district.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 2. Could I have a motion on item 3? Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 55, the applicant satisfied the requirements of Land Development Code, Section 165-68, regarding lot frontage.
Thank you. And a second on this one? Member Hume, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 3. Can I have a motion on item 4? Member Boucher?
Mr. Chair, I find the board, jeez. I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 43, and 55, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-72, requiring adequate parking spaces, including handicap accessible spaces, Section 165-73 regarding parking area location, setbacks, and screening, and Section 165-74 regarding minimum design standards for surface parking and parking lot design.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval, item 4. Have a motion on item 5, please. Member Hayes, you kind of raised your hand.
Ken had his hand. Okay. I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 43, and 55, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-76, requiring adequate loading spaces, Section 165-77 regarding the loading space size, and Section 165-78 regarding general loading space requirements.
Thank you. Member Boucher, you had your hand up too.
I'll
You second on that one? Yep, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 5. Could I have a motion on item 6, please? Member Boucher?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 7, 24, 25, 50, 58, and 62, the applicant satisfied Land Development Codes Section 165-79 and Section 165-80, requiring adequate connection to necessary utilities, including public water and sewer, when possible.
Thank you. A second on this motion? Member Jonas? Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 6. Motion on item 7, please. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 36, 55, and 58, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-81, requiring appropriate outdoor lighting that minimizes light trespass onto existing properties, adjacent properties.
Thank you. Second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval, item 7. A motion on item 8, please. Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 49, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-82, requiring adequate fire protection.
Thank you. A second on this one. Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous on item 8. A motion on item 9? Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibit 2 and 55, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, Section 165-83, requiring adequate electrical services.
Thank you. Is there a second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 9. Motion on item 10, please. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 21, 56, 57, 59, 60, and 62, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, Section 165-84, requiring provisions for surface water and storm discharge.
Drainage?
Drainage, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. Before we get to roll call vote, I need a second on that. Member Boucher, you had your hand up, didn't you? You'll second it. So roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on 10. Can I have a motion on item 11? Member Boucher?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 25, and 62, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, Section 165-85, and Section 165-86, requiring submitting information of anticipated sanitary flow and compliance with sewer regulations.
Thank you. A second on this one? Member Hume? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So that completes part 1. All items voted unanimously on. Part 2 requires the project to meet the district site development standards under Article 19. Can I have a motion on that item? Member Hume?
Yes, the board, Chair, the board, I move that the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 3, 43, and 55, the applicant satisfied 165-135 of the Land Development Code regarding height limits, building envelope standards, floor area ratio, impervious surface ratio, and buffer yards.
Thank you. A second on this one. Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on part 2. Moving on to part 3, which requires the project to meet section 165-97 of the GISD, Government and Institutional Service District. Motion on that item? Member Boucher?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on the findings made in parts 1 and 2 of section 4 of this document, and based on exhibits 2, 7, and 55, the project meets the requirements of section 165-97B for permitted use within the G and ISD, which is the Government and Institutional Service District.
Thank you. A second on this one? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of part 3. Moving on to part 4, which requires the project to meet section 165-114 of the Land Development Approval Standards. Motion on item 1? Member Hume?
The board, Mr. Chair, I move that the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 43, 58, and 62, the applicant satisfy the requirements of Land Development Code 165-114 B to C regarding the proposed parking and loading layout and the proposed access drives from the site to any public right-of-way being arranged in a reasonable and safe configuration, including the provision of safe pedestrian travel to all on-site uses.
Thank you. A second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on item 1 of part 4. Motion on item 2? Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 21, 56, 57, 59, 60, and 62, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114D's requirements for preventing adverse effects from stormwater runoff and ensuring adequate capacity for stormwater collection systems to handle the runoff from the development.
Thank you. A second on this one, Member Boucher. Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on item 2. A motion on item 3. Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 36, 55, and 58, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114E's requirements for outdoor lighting.
Thank you. A second on this one? Member Hume, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on item 3. Motion on item 4. Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 3, and 55, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114F's requirements for landscaping, tree preservation, and species type.
Thank you. A second on this one? Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 4. Have a motion on item 5. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 55, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114G's requirements for building location and setbacks.
Thank you. Member Hume, a second. Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 6. Member Hume?
Mr. Chair, I move that the board finds that based on exhibit 15 to 17 and 52, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code 165-114.H, requiring a project not have an unreasonable adverse effect on the historic site, significant wildlife habitat, or rare and irreplaceable natural area.
Thank you. Second on this one, Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on item 6. Last item, number 7. Can I have a motion on this one? Member Boucher?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on the findings made above in this document and exhibits 2, 6 through 34, 47, 48, 50, 52, 56 through 57, 60, and 62, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114J regarding compliance with 38 MRSA, Section 484, and applicable Department of Environmental Protection regulations, which includes Chapter 371, 372, 373, 375, 376, 377, and 500.
Thank you. Tongue twister there. Second on this one, Member Brush, thank you. And a roll call vote, Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That means unanimous approval of all of the standards leading up to the decision. So I would like a motion on the decision. There is a condition already typed into that decision, and we're going to add a condition that also the drawings be changed to show Phase 3 as being planned as a 30-bed phase.
Phase 2, right?
And
Phase 2.
so,
Phase 2.
what did I say, Phase 3?
Yeah.
You had 3 in your mind.
I would recommend the specific wording be to that they give us modified plans to the planning office for
That's
the
a good
30
idea.
days of approval.
So we're gonna ask that planning office receive modified plans within
30 days.
30 days that show Phase 2 being planned as a 30-bed phase. Member Hume, would you like to take a shot at this decision?
Sure. Chair, I move that the board finds that the proposed project meets the requirements for land development permit for a major site development and site location of development, and therefore grants the land development permit for the proposed project with the condition that the developer's traffic engineer assess the operation of the new intersection once the facility has been open for 6 months, and that the assessment be forwarded to the planning division and engineering department. In addition, that there be a requirement that the plans, modified plans be submitted to the planning department showing phase 2 containing 30 beds within 30 days of today.
Excellent, thank you. And a second on this motion? Member Brush, thank you. A roll call vote, Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So this project is unanimously approved. Your application is approved.
Thank you very much
Code
for
officer
all your
doing
work.
those things, yeah, thanks for coming in again, Jim, appreciate it. All right, good job of getting through that one, gang. So we are done with all items on the agenda. We do have other business thoughts on any further thoughts on land development code or land use planning. We do allow time for that. The board has anything? Or if staff has anything they want to add? No, you just yawned, you don't.
Yeah, and now I'm gonna yawn.
I believe you. That's all right. Any other comments or questions? And if not, I would remind board members that we have drawings,
No, just the decision for,
just the decisions to sign before you leave this evening. Any other comments?
Just a quick
Anywhere?
question.
Member
Are there
Jones?
things I have to sign while I was gone, or does that not matter?
You attended.
Right, but.
They don't
for-
have to have all the signatures, as
okay.
long as they get enough signatures, right? We're adequate on that.
generally, I mean, it's ideal to have all your signatures that voted on it.
I mean, if you need me to come down, I'll just come down.
I think it'll be okay. Yeah, it's mainly an issue with like subdivision plans.
It was funny,
It
because
was
I
mostly
stood
just,
there,
yeah, decisions.
I stood there for quite a while trying to figure out why we didn't have all the signatures until I remembered you were on Zoom, so you couldn't possibly have signed. Did you have a question before you took off, or you just?
No, I was just gonna congratulate you, that's a tough work going through that
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And thank you very much. Have a
You're
nice
welcome.
evening.
Good night, Jim. Yeah, so if everyone would sign before they leave, that would be great. And the time is now 8:41, and I consider